So I've had a really good reading year, and my average star rating on Storygraph, which has quarter stars, so it's a little more accurate than the average star rating on Goodreads, is like 4.37 stars, which feels weird because it feels weird to give a book 8.5 out of 10, which is like 4.25 stars, and be like, that's a below average book for the year. So one day I was driving home, and I was like, I wonder if I can do some Excel spreadsheet nonsense and figure out what would my ratings have to be average a 5 out of 10. So because some people try and do that. Some people say the average book I read should be 2.5 stars, or it should be 5 out of 10. And the way I phrase it, if you look on my Goodreads, I have an English description vaguely of each rating, and I might rewrite them because I wrote them a long time ago, and they're not super accurate at this point. But as a vibe check, they are. And for me, a 5 out of 10 is not average. A 5 out of 10 is, above 5 out of 10 means I enjoyed reading it. Below 5 out of 10 means I didn't enjoy reading it. So most books should be above a 5 because reading is my favorite hobby. And if the average book was a 5, I'd probably find a different hobby because that would mean I'm not enjoying myself half the time. But I was really curious. I was like, what would it actually look like? So I did some Excel spreadsheet nonsense and normalized my rating to have a normal-ish distribution and about an average of 5, and the results were pretty psychopathic. So I'm gonna read out some of the results we get, and then I'm gonna talk about why I think what I do makes sense and why I don't do this and the downsides. So I have a list of my book of the months since I started making videos, so starting in September of 2020, and the average rating for book of the months is an 8.2, which an 8.2 right now is a good book, but usually I get one thing over 9 each month, and there's some that are pretty funny. In May of 2023, my book of the month was Lovecraft Country with a 3.7 out of 10. Now, granted, I read 2 books in May of 2023. I'm pretty sure it's because I played all of Mass Effect 1 and 2 that month. But I still thought that was kind of funny. In July of 2021, my book of the month was a 6.5, which Morningstar ended up being a 6.5, which also just feels a little bit silly. And if I look at, I calculated my average series for my top 10 series-ish. I might have missed a couple. I didn't think about it that much. And then also a couple other series that I think are clearly good, just to see but aren't among my favorites ever, just to see what the results were. And there's some pretty funky results. So first off, Dragon Keeper got a 0 out of 10, which is pretty funny because I don't dislike Dragon Keeper. That's the first Rainwild's book, and it's my least favorite Realm of the Elderlings book, but I don't think it's bad. I just kind of think it's fine. And it's kind of wild because even with this that vastly lowers my ratings, my scores for Live Ship and Tawny Man are 9.8, 9.3, 9.6, 9.8, 8.9, and 9.6. And then it jumps to a 0. So that would give Realm of the Elderlings a range of scores of 0 to 10, which is pretty funny. And aside from just being funny, because it ends up being that there are multiple series where I have a book that gets a 0 out of 10 and a nearly a 10 out of 10. Wheel of Time as well has a 0 and a 9.6, which is just pretty ridiculous. I do like the 9.6 book way more than I like the 0 book, but it's not that big of a jump. And even the jumps for the others, it just overestimates the jump. But I also think ratings being a bit incoherent like this makes them serve their purpose less. And I do think star ratings or ratings out of 10 actually do serve a useful purpose. It's why I continue to use them. Some people think they don't serve a useful purpose, but I'm now going to say what I think they do, because I think they're a very useful tool as to communicate very, very efficiently broad opinions, which is useful because when you run into someone's review for a book for the first time, you have no context for what their tastes are. and it's hard to know how useful some feedback is. So, for example, if I'm looking, if there's a book I'm thinking of reading, and I look at a review, and it's like, the character work was really bad, like the characters weren't interesting at all, I'm like, oh, I mean, character work for me is the most important part of a novel, so maybe this isn't something I'm interested in. But like, then if I, click their Goodreads and I see what they thought of other books, and I look at their review for like Realm of the Elderlings, and they're like, the character work is bad, and A Song of Ice and Fire, and they're like, the character work was bad, and Vorkos again, and they're like, the character work was bad. I'm like, all right, clearly we're looking at character work, like, and characterization and what makes characters interesting and compelling very differently. And like, I can probably ignore that, which knowing when you can ignore things is pretty useful. And it's very useful to have ratings, because when you run into someone who you haven't encountered before, or just you don't know that well, like if it's someone you haven't seen for a while, and you see they have like put out a video or a Goodreads review for a book that's on your radar, it's pretty useful to be able to very, very quickly check how well your tastes align with their tastes, and whether you prioritize the same thing. And I also think ratings are useful just in the context of an individual review, because it can recontextualize what's in the review. Because if someone is complaining about something for like 2 paragraphs in a written review, and then you look down and they gave it a 9 out of 10, you can probably be like, okay, they're complaining about this was a lot of complaining because it took a long time to like explain exactly the thing they didn't like about them, or they noticed this, but it's not a high priority to them, which also tells you again something about the reviewer, which is useful. And vice versa, if you see like a bunch of positive stuff and it's mostly positive, and then the review has like a couple complaints, and you check and it's like 2 stars, then it's like, okay, these things are clearly very important for that person, and that's useful for you at choosing which books to read and like figuring out which books you're likely to like, which I think I'm good at picking books I like, which is why my average score on Storygraph is a 4.37. And that's the big problem I have with trying to make my average rating a 5 is, does that mean if I start reading better books that I have to like readjust my past ratings and lower them? And if I start reading worse books, do I have to bump them up? Which seems very weird to me. And also, like, so this is the ultimate series of why ratings for me that average a 5, like, the one that got the most psychopathic results is my scores for Malazan Book of the Fallen. And it would lead to people, like, if these were the scores that I was giving Malazan books as I was reading them, people would be like, this dude is totally all over the place. Like, his scores are not consistent within each other. Like, I don't understand what he's reading. And sometimes, like, what is even going on? So these are my scores for Malazan. If you mess with my ratings to make them average a 5. I would have given Gardens of the Moon a 3.5 out of 10. Except that's actually not true, because I've since bumped up my score from Gardens of the Moon since I gave it, so it would have actually been lower than that. But the score I have currently would be a 3.5 out of 10, which, like, I enjoy Gardens of the Moon. Like, I definitely like Gardens of the Moon. And if I'd come out and given it a 3.5 out of 10, everyone would be like, oh, he's clearly just not the author for you, you should DNF it. Like, you shouldn't continue. And then I'd come out and I'd give Dead House Gates a 6.7 out of 10. Which, remember, in the context here, literally half the books are below a 5 out of 10. So, like, a 6.7 out of 10 on this scale is pretty good. But ratings, remember, I'm saying they're useful for communication. They're only useful if we're using a similar frame of reference. And if I start a series and I give the first 2 books a 3.5 and a 6.7, people are just going to tell me I should DNF it. And then Memories of Ice is an 8.3, so people would be like, oh, okay, he, like, kind of likes this series. And then House of Change is a 2.6. People would be like, no shot. Midnight Tides is an 8.5. The next 2 are both 7s. Toll the Hounds gets an 8.9. That is right, Toll the Hounds, which is, like, among my favorite books of all time. Doesn't even get 5 stars on Goodreads. Dust of Dreams gets a 0, which, like... So if you know me, I've complained about Dust of Dreams a lot. I'm not going to do it now. If you want to know the specifics, you can find my bottom book list of 2021, and I go on what I don't like about Dust of Dreams. But, like, a 0 for Dust of Dreams is ridiculous, because Dust of Dreams has a bunch of stuff I don't like. It also has a bunch of stuff that's really fantastic. Like, there's probably like a third of the chapters in that book I think are like really awesome and extremely good. So, like, I'm giving this a 0, which a 0 is like no merit whatsoever. And then there'd be a review of like, hey, here's a bunch of stuff I liked about it. And it's just very weird. And then The Crippled God gets an 8.5. And then it also gets very weird for the series that I clearly like, but like are not all-time favorites. The books of Earthsea end up with an average score of 4.6 out of 10. Which, like, if anyone sees that, they're going to be like, oh, he doesn't like Earthsea. But I do like Earthsea. So, essentially, the point of this video is just, one, ratings serve a useful purpose. And this is why my average score is quite high. So I actually think the thing is, it's partially selection bias, right? Because I'm good at finding books I like. And this gets validated with the book club I do for the university. Because my average score for the book club, which is still like fantasy and sci-fi books that people thought it was plausible would be good. And sometimes I was directly involved in picking. My average score is probably like a 6 point something out of 10. I'm pretty sure, and I might do this, if I picked books randomly from a bookstore. And one day I might actually do this. I might I don't want to do multiple in a row because I'll probably not enjoy them that much. And I don't want to ruin a month of reading. But I might do for 3 months in a row, read one book that I select fully randomly. Like go into my local bookstore. I'll not do fully randomly because I'll go sci-fi fantasy. So I'll still go the genre that I'm likely to like. But I'll count how many shelves are there fantasy, random number generator. Okay, we're going from this shelf. How many books are on there? Random number generator. Okay, this is the book. Oh, that's book 3 in a series. We'll just read book 1 from that series and see what the score ends up being. I suspect it would probably average maybe below a 5 out of 10. Because the reason we care about picking books and the entire reason Goodreads and BookTube and BookTalk and Bookstagram are a thing is to try and help people pick books. That's the most fundamental, useful thing provided by book reviewers and book internet is that it hopefully helps people find books that they like. So if I go read books that I haven't vetted at all, I probably won't like them. I'm just going to tell you some kind of funny ratings now that I think are funny. So first off, something that I think is quite funny is only 4 authors, if I did this, would ever have gotten 5 stars. It's only Hobb, Guy Gavriel, Brandon, Ken Liu, and Jim Butcher. And Robert Jordan. Demon in White doesn't get 5 stars, which is ridiculous. Go read my Goodreads review for Demon in White. And imagine that review. I'll probably post a screenshot up of it here somewhere. Imagine reading this review with 4 stars. That would just be a little bit silly. Guy Gavriel would have 2 5-star books, which is wild. The Black Company, my average score would be a 6.4. Go watch my Black Company series review. At the end, I'm 6.5 out of 10. Average score, 3 stars. It would be Black Company order would have been 3 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars, 3 stars barely, 4 stars, 4 stars. And I would have been I think this is a top 10 series for me. It's just very silly. I will say there are some upsides of this. And the upside of doing this, looking at these scores, is that my true all-time favorites are differentiated more. If my average score was actually a 5 when I read, Brightness Long Ago, and I was yeah, that gets a whatever score it ends up being, a 9.5 or something. That'd be oh, holy crap. When I read Terra Ignota this year, when I was giving the score, or Vorkoskin, and I was giving, the Terra Ignota scores, 2 8.9s, the people who cared would be oh shit, 8.9s, because that'd be super high. And it is there is something that appeals to me to being 8.9, that's ridiculously high. But I don't think it's worth how often it would lead to miscommunication and people looking at my Goodreads ratings and being like, hey, why do you hate the Dune series with its average score of 4 out of 10? And I'd be like, well, I don't hate Dune, actually. I really like Dune quite a bit. So yeah, this is me if I was a psychopath. These results were like, when I was looking at the scores, I was like, these are psychopathic. How do you give this many zeros? So I kind of just rambled about this. Let me know what you think. Are you team ratings? If you were on the fence, was my case for ratings being useful convincing? I think ratings are pretty useful. And like, there are people who don't use ratings. Hi, Johanna and Philip, who are lovely. When they finish a book and they mark read on Goodreads, I'm like, how much did you like it though? I want to know. And when they like give a positive review, I'm like, okay, but like, did you just like this book, or are you obsessed with it? Because like, a lot of reviews, like the things we say, are like really positive. Because if I give a review for a book that's like an 8.5 out of 10, I'm gonna be really positive about it. And then I'll also be really positive about the 9.5 out of 10. But it's hard to tell at the end unless I'm like 9.5 out of 10. Then you know, like, oh, he didn't just like it. Like, this is one of his favorite books ever. Anyway, this was a really random video. I don't know why I did this. I wanted to use Microsoft Excel for random bullshit. Thanks, Microsoft Excel. Also, it's funny because at first when I was trying to get the scores over into Excel, I used ChatGPT, and I just sent it like my book ranking, like Google Doc, and it started like making things up. So it fully just lied. Like I was like, hey, I've got like the scores written down. Can you like turn this into a spreadsheet? And it's like, yeah. And I was like, why? And I scroll through and I'm like, okay, that's useful. And then I get to it and I'm like, wait, why is iron gold on here? I'm like, why did you add iron gold? And it's like, sorry, we'll try again. Then I did it again and it added another book. I can't remember what it was. I think it was like Lathe of Heaven or something. And I'm like, where did you get that from? I didn't give you that. So anyway, don't trust ChatGPT. Have a good day, everyone.